though largely personality-less people, present today. Dr. Kovanovic and Dr. Joksimovic are two of the most cited individuals in the learning analytics field. They've been actively involved in research in this space really since the start of the first Learning Analytics Conference, and they are increasingly involved in working with schools, working on a series of grants, and helping to increase the impact of learning analytics work across a range of different sectors. Both of their PhDs were in topics related to learning analytics, and I think there's a few people that I would rather want to provide an introductory overview of the learning analytics field than Srečko and Vita. So today the format is, they're going to do, each of them will spend about an hour in a presentation format. This event, I should mention, is put together, hosted by C3L, the Centre for Change and Complexity in Learning out of the University of South Australia in Adelaide. And the format presentation will be local group work. In the future, there may be for remote satellite people joining, there'll be group work that's done online as well. But in this case, this is our first kickoff. So on that note, Vita, Srečko, over to you guys. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you, George. So just one thing, we will have 1 hour here presentation, then we'll do some practical work. So if anyone online wants to join us in that practical part, that's fine. But, oh yeah, there you go, George. But if not, you are free to go after 1 hour. So we will do, where is this camera? Oh yeah, I got you, George. Can you see me now? Oh yeah. Okay. Thank you all for coming here today, and thank you for joining us online. Just to mention, we will be recording this so we could share later on with everyone. For some of you, since this is the introduction to learning analytics, for some of you this is not going to be so new, like for Ryan, for example, but we expect you to contribute later in the practical part. So Vita and I will be talking about some of the drivers that led to the development of the field. We will talk about some of the applications of learning analytics, and at the end we will go to some of the practical parts where we will be working together to identify some of the challenges and requirements for learning analytics adoption. So as George said, the event is hosted by Center for Change and Complexity in Learning. We are all affiliated with this center, I mean, Vita, Sasha, Barb. So the center focuses on exploring human and artificial cognition to understand knowledge processes and their impact on society. So we blame George for this statement. He came up with this. So a little bit about us. Vita, do you want to? Oh, I can just.
Yeah, you take. Yeah.
So Vita, research fellow at UniSA in School of Education, C3L in School of Education. Both of us have background in computer science. We did PhD at University of Edinburgh. Vita in informatics. I finished mine in education. We've been engaged with the learning analytics community for quite some time now, and for LAC 2020, Vita is also the program chair. So if you have any questions, if you'd like to join us in Germany, talk to Vita. My background quite similar, research slightly different. But let's go to the more important part, how everything started, how the whole idea of learning analytics got developed and how the entire field started. So what led to the development of the learning analytics as a research field was the fact that all of a sudden we had a lot of data that we need to make sense of and to utilize so we could understand what's going on in online settings, either learning or other settings across other industries. So if you can see this slide clearly, so on the left side we have all the infrastructure, all the pretty much different technologies developed just for the sake of collecting, storing, and accessing to data. So just for the sake of collecting and keeping data somewhere, we have, over the last few years, we developed all kinds of technologies and all kinds of approaches. On the right side, of course, all kind of analytics and machine learning algorithms have been developed to make use of this data and help us make sense of all this. Of course, marketing started first. So the first application of big data and utilization of big data was related to marketing. And you all know when you buy something in Amazon or watch a movie at Netflix or search something in Google, they will keep track of that and they will make a recommendation on whatever you did. On top of that, we build all kinds of applications. So big data in just a short statement transform every industry. Every industry nowadays tries to make use of all this data, all those applications, and build applications that will help them understand large and complex data infrastructures. For education, it's not much of a difference. So the huge change in terms of education and data in education happened with the development of online learning. All of a sudden, we were able to collect all kinds of data about learners and their learning processes. All we had to do is basically to make sense of it. I would be the first one to say that we don't have big data in education, maybe more large scale. But when you look at it from different perspectives, it's not just about the quantity, it's also about the quality. So we have all different data sources, and we will touch base on that soon as well. All different learning platforms, different sensors we now use nowadays. And as we go from higher education more to the R-12 or K-12 settings, we see more use of all those kind of sensors and different data collection methods. So it's basically, I guess we can talk about big data as well in education. But after development of online learning in 2008 and later on in 2012, we also saw the rise of massive open online courses and different platforms like edX and Coursera, and that's where the richness of data actually is coming from pretty much, because all of a sudden you had thousands of learners from different backgrounds, from different countries, with different experience, with different motivation, engaged in the same online learning space trying to achieve their learning goals, which was quite interesting time, and still research in MOOCs takes a lot of attracts a lot of attention. So when we talk about learning analytics, we say that everything started pretty much back in 2011. Once upon a time, when the brave king, that's another story. So when the small group of people gathered in Banff in Canada and started the first conference on learning analytics. In 2017, like 6 years later, we published the first handbook of learning analytics, which is open access, and that's one of the good things that's coming out from this Society for Learning Analytics research is everything we do is open access. Journal of Learning Analytics is open access, so everything that's published there, you can access freely to all the resources. And soon we will be publishing the second handbook of learning analytics, which is improved version of the first one. But then again, when we talk about learning analytics in general and drivers that led to the development of the field, we always say that learning analytics builds on many different fields and uses many different methods coming from different areas, different research disciplines such as statistics or psychology or education. So we can't really, when we talk about learning analytics, we can't really ignore the whole history that in one way or the other led to the development of the field. Back in 1920s, we had the first early intelligent tutoring systems. The name was slightly different at the time because intelligent tutoring systems came up late in 1970s, but that marks a start of beginning pretty much of this whole inquiry to achieve the personalization of learning and to develop individualized and personalized learning. Then in the 1950s, we had cognitive revolution and development of something that later be known as cognitive science. And then in the 1970s, we started to utilize artificial intelligence techniques in computer-assisted learning. So what changed from 1970s to nowadays, not just in education, but across all the industries, is that access to data. So now we have much more data than we used to have in 1970s. Of course, we have much better processing power, much better algorithms. We've been studying those algorithms for so many years, but data makes, I would say, one of the biggest distinction between what was then and what do we have now. And pretty much at the same time when learning analytics developed, just a little bit before the field of educational data mining emerged, was established as a society. And in 2016, we also have the first report on learning analytics adoption, learning analytics practices in Australia. But what is learning analytics? How we define learning analytics? This is the definition. This definition from 2011, and there were a few attempts to revise the definition, but not much changed since then. So learning analytics is basically defined as the measurement, collection, analysis, and reporting of data about learners and their context for the purpose of understanding and optimizing learning in the environments in which it occurs. So basically, we have learning happening across different contexts. We are trying to capture the measures that to tell us something about learning. We collect this data, we analyze, and we are reporting back to teachers, reporting back to program directors, reporting back to students, all for the purpose of understanding what's going on in these environments and optimizing learning in those environments. One of the early learning analytics pipelines basically depicts what we just said. So we have learning happening in online or face-to-face settings. We collect data, store somewhere, do the analysis, and feed back to teachers or administrators or to students. But nowadays we tend to have teachers in this loop all the time. We don't necessarily go back to students directly. So what were some of the promises when we established the field of learning analytics? Well, one of the biggest drivers, or one of the biggest, well, let's say opportunities for learning analytics was for institutions to show the impact. And that was one of the main things that led to the development of the field. So we have data, we have all the students, we need to show that we make a difference. So if we deployed all those analytics, if we invested all the money in developing those solutions for online learning, we need to show that there was an impact, that you're making some kind of impact. Also, we hope that that learning analytics will help increasing retention, supporting students at risk, and proactively drive success. And this is the main point of learning analytics. We don't want to just measure something at the end of the course and say, yeah, this student failed, this student passed. The point of learning analytics is to provide means to proactively drive success, to get involved while it's not too late. And of course, providing the assessment beyond the grade. So it's about, and we'll talk more to that as well, it's about the assessment for learning, not about the assessment for learning. We don't want to say number, we don't want to provide the number like grade or whatever. It's more about getting understanding of the quality of learning and how can we help to improve learning. So what are some of the key elements of learning analytics? Well, we said that we had a lot of data, but data without theory is pretty much nothing. And we need to think how we design for learning to happen, so we would be able to capture different dimensions of learning and provide feedback to teachers and students. So we identified theory, design, and data science as the three main components of learning analytics. So what kind of data we collect? Why do we need data science? So as you can see, some of the first applications of learning analytics focused on using data from learning environments and student information systems, because that's where you start pretty much at the university. So these are the systems that collect all the data about student demographics, lesson planning, enrollment, and so on. Learning environments, of course, all the trace data, time-stamped events, when something happened, analyzing social interactions, content, and so on. Later on, we started to utilize a little bit of the library management systems and to get library attendance and similar data, all kinds of instruments, of course. survey questionnaire, focus groups. These are in an age, this would be more qualitative instruments, but still, this is something that help us understand the impact learning analytics had and to help us develop our methods further. Multimodal learning analytics, well, definition is a bit tricky because even if you use survey data and trace data, that's multimodal. These are two modes of data. But still, multimodal usually refers to data we collect from EEG, eye gaze, gesture, and other psychophysiological data using all kinds of different sensors. And it is kind of interesting, but back in 2018, when we had the first event at the Learning Analytics Conference that talked to, where we organized learning analytics in schools, where we wanted to make the shift for the first time from higher education to K-12 or R-12, most of the papers submitted to that workshop were focused on using this kind of data in studying learning in traditional face-to-face classroom, which was quite surprising. But then again, you don't have much of the technology there. You don't have online learning systems like we have at the university. So it somehow made sense to get all kinds of sensors, put in the classroom, and try to measure whatever we can, no matter how scary it might sound. And of course, social media, especially at the beginning, back in 2008, 2009, a lot of Twitter, Facebook blog data that was quite popular at the time. And third-party tools like ebooks, journals, and other applications that we integrate within our learning management systems. But then again, yes, we have all different kinds of data, but how do we actually find the evidence of learning? How we know that learning actually occurred? How we know that our students actually learning something? A big deal there presents the idea, what are we trying to capture? So we can't really just go and say, capture all kind of different counts of access to videos, to different videos. We know we have to define what do we measure, so we will be able to capture that, and so we will be able to make meaningful interpretation of learning processes. So this slide just talks to one of the attempts we did to redefine the existing engagement framework into the context of online learning. Well, the whole idea was based in the notion that most of the papers published in learning analytics talk about engagement in some way. Most of us sometimes fail to define engagement, just say we just capture engagement, no matter what it might be. But actually the main idea from this work was, let's try to define this. Let's try to provide some of the metrics that to talk to cognitive engagement, that to talk to academic engagement or behavioral engagement. So when we try to interpret and provide feedback back to students, we wouldn't tell them just go and watch more videos. Why that's important? So we need to provide context why some of those measures actually are important, and we need to know what those measures actually capture. Design is important from so many different aspects. So designing learning activities, designing interfaces, designing interventions. There is this systematic literature review published recently about dashboards. And when we talk about learning analytics, we can't really avoid talking about dashboards, and they make really one of the main aspects of learning analytics and the whole interface, what teachers see from the data before they engage with students. And those recent studies actually talk to the notion that those dashboards are not very useful because they just try to show different counts, different activity numbers without really linking this back to theory and providing teachers with meaningful insights into what actually those dashboards are showing. I think Victor will cover some of that later on in his talk. But another aspect of design in learning analytics is stems back from the whole idea of learning analytics. Learning analytics is not here for the assessment of learning. Learning analytics is built to support the assessment for learning. So what that means? This idea of assessment for learning links nicely to the network learning research and the idea of design for learning. So the whole idea says we can't design learning. We are designing for learning to happen. So we design tasks that our students will engage with. We design environments. We say it's going to happen face-to-face, it's going to happen online or wherever. We design whether it's going to be individual level, it's going to be group level, or community, or whatever we support, and we design outcomes. But we do not design activity. Activity is something that students do in this learning process, and that's something that's emergent. And learning analytics fits there. Learning analytics should capture those activities. So what does it mean to design with learning analytics in mind? But that's the main idea of learning analytics. If you want to capture cognitive engagement, you need to design for that. Usually, we had that situation so many times. We go back analyzing course and say, let's find evidence of affective engagement. Did we design for that to happen? Did we design somehow to capture that? That's, I guess, the most difficult part, especially in online learning. We don't have that we don't have easy ways of capturing affect in online settings, and we all say it's important, and it is important. But if we haven't designed for something to happen, if we don't know how we're going to capture that, we can't really look for that later on in analytics. The same for academic or behavioral engagement. Behavioral is kind of easy because whatever you design, all those activities that would feed there. But you need to know when you design your course, you have to think about, these are the aspects I care about. This is what will tell me how learners progress through the course and how we can measure, how we can find the evidence of learning, and how we're going to find that something is wrong so we could intervene and feed back to students. There's always discussion about similarity and differences between two sister fields, education data mining and learning analytics. And I guess the simple explanation would be EDM focuses on how do we extract value from these big data sets and building the algorithms, and learning analytics talks more into how can we optimize opportunities for online learning. So that would be the main, I'd say, difference between these two fields. You want to add something? No, okay, cool. Going back to theory, there are two aspects: adoption of theory and contributing back to the theory. So one thing is, maybe I can hold here for a bit. So whatever we do in learning analytics, it has to be based on the theory, because it doesn't really make sense to design activities that do not stem from educational theories. And I'll talk to that a little bit later. But also contribute back to the theory. One of the most commonly used theories in learning analytics is definitely self-regulated learning theory, but that's developed in slightly different context. Before we had the whole online learning developed the way we know it today. So when we interpret some of our findings, we do some of the analysis based on this self-regulated learning theory, we have to bear in mind that some of those assumptions do not hold in this context. So we do have theory, we design analytics around theory, we design courses around theory, but we also have all this data coming from our students. So there might be something that does not necessarily align with what we used to have before, what we knew before. So there has to be that link back to contributing back to the theory as well. So we like to mention this LAC 16 keynote by Paul Kirchner at the Learning Analytics Conference back in 2016. George missed that one as well. When we asked Paul, what do learning sciences have to do with learning analytics, he said, well, just about everything. And back in 2015, there were a few papers talking to the importance of theory in learning analytics. So with more data, it's not that we can do whatever we want, it's that theory in that sense plays an even more critical role in analyzing and interpreting data. And do you want to take over now?
Yes, so welcome everyone. So I'm just going to go from this part on. So just going over briefly some of the example analytics platforms. So after Sachko introduce the basics of what analytics is, what are the key elements of theory, design, data science, and how all they fit together to create, work together to enable learning analytics. So first I'm going to go briefly over some of the example platforms and then go to describe a bit more in more detail around adoption of analytics, some of the challenges as that we know from literature and researching how analytics is being adopted. So first, our platforms, not saying that all good, but just some of the examples. So first, this is what we have at UniSA, just one part. We have more things, but this is something that UniSA teachers see every day. And so this is what we call teaching dashboard, but you will get some of the information, basic information about the course. And so in the top right corner you see 0. That means how many students didn't log into the course. So that's the first information teacher will look at. Say it's a 3rd day of the course and they see anybody didn't log in at all. If you didn't log in, you maybe have technical issues, something is happening. So that's the first thing. And then all the other elements. So how many people engage in the last 24 hours? That's the second field, 58.9%. So this is something that you might use, for example, at certain time of the week. For example, after the lecture, you told them to do something, and then you will use, these pieces of information. Important is to notice that all of these you need to interpret yourself, what they mean. So if you just look at, if you don't understand how you can use it, that's a problem. So any analytics, and this one, is no different, require you to be able to understand, to interpret and make use of it. Otherwise, you will just get a dashboard that looks nice. There's some bar plots, pie charts, whatever. Looks nice, but what do you do with it? And that's a wasted investment. If a school or a university invests, a lot of money, or department invests a lot of money into something like that, that's a big problem. And another thing, and this was one of the earliest systems that got a lot of attraction, called course signals. So the system was that simple. So in the bottom left corner, you see how it looks like. You have students, and for every student, you only have red, green, or yellow, and for different courses. And whether red means student is in trouble of failing or dropping out and so on. Green, all good. Yellow, not sure. And why it attracted a lot of attention is, you can see on the other part is this graph showing that the courses that adopted course signal were showing much better student outcomes, and significantly bigger. So that was a major discovery. Turned out the way the research was done was it was a bit overinflated. So there were some statistical errors there that got resolved. So it is better, but not nowhere near this good, because this was almost like too good to be true. But I like this tool regardless, because it shows one thing, that it needs to be simple. That's the first thing. It needs to be simple. It can't be 50 bar plots and lines and 3D animations and things. It should be simple. Another thing that show the problem with those systems is it needs to be actionable. So the problem is when you see red, student is red, now what? What are you going to do with that? If you have a class of 20 students, you probably don't even need this analytics. You will know whether the student is, what's happening or what's the reason. But if you have 200 and say online students, you cannot talk to them easily, or you have too many, like 50 of them are red. Now what you're going to do? Maybe they're all red because they have a certain problem with the course design. Maybe they don't understand certain learning activity, and they will just need more explanation or more guidance around something that you can do in certain ways. So that was the problem. It's not actionable. So we realize it needs to be simple. That's good. But if it's too simple and it's not actionable, that's a problem. And if you look at, for example, design of modern, say, fitness trackers, originally have all the lines and things like that, yes, but more modern one also come with a certain hints. It will not just say, here is your bars, for example, for sleep. It will also say, every day how many hours you slept, but also say, try to go bed before 11 or something like that. So they will distill information and put a certain recommendation. So that's and even they realized that that's important. This is another thing that's very simple. I mean, you always not feel, what you call learning analytics, but we did some data analysis, very simple analysis at UniSA to show we have online courses, and of course facilitators need to be online, have to be online for a certain amount of hours during the week, when they should do that. And that depends on the course. If the course is a business course taken by, some managers, they will be fine as part of their professional development. They will be doing that during the work hours. That will be, expected. And some courses are taken by, stay-at-home moms, over a weekend or something like that. So that takes depends on the population and so on. So we've just calculated how many student logs, records of student activity as in a different part of the day. So on the x-axis down you have the day of the week, and on the y-axis every half an hour interval. So we can see most of the activity happens on Sunday, say from 10 in the morning till 8. And then you see also some of the activity on other days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday in the evenings, but dropping off. You see the color is getting, weaker. So probably my interpretation would be people are working on weekends, they didn't finish something, they do a bit on a Monday morning, also around 10, it's still not busy. Then in the evenings you try to catch up. And then as the week is going over, people are more tired, you get less of that. But anyways, this was a useful thing to just get when they should be online. So in this case, for example, being Monday at 10 in the morning seems a reasonable time to be available online, from 10 to 12, something like that. Now, important part is we mentioned the connection. Is it a meaningful measure? In this case, if you just want to know when this should be online, it is a meaningful measure. It's pretty reasonable to think this is actually correct, what's happening. We don't know, maybe they're watching something else, doing other things, but it's a meaningful to expect that this will be, represents what we want to know, when you should be online. Another tool that we have here at UniSA is called OnTask. That's actually a project developed by multiple universities in Australia, and you can almost think of it as a learning analytics mail merge. You have a table where every row is a student, and then you have different columns. Column can be the name, first name, last name, the scores on the quizzes, certain activities, and whether student open assignment, completed assignment, all of those things. And then you can write automated rules. For example, a student achieved 80% on the exam, which is not bad, but didn't read certain materials. You can still send an email saying, hey, excellent job, hi, and then name, hi, John, you achieved 82%, which is great. However, you might even be better if you did these certain learning activities, try to do it for the next quiz. And then you can automate those emails, you store them, and then they can be reused in the next offer of the course. And if you're running, say, you have a course with 500 students, that's a pretty useful thing. Again, it depends on your pedagogy, on your knowledge of what email should be about. Most of the teachers would be sending them anyways. It's just automating and making it simpler. And those are not, I would say, those are not generic machine emails, that are really emails coming from teacher, just created in a more automated way. And then student can reply back to you, and then you can go on after that to a normal conversation, like any other email. It just enables you to speed up things and be consistent across course offers. This is how it looks like. So on the side, you will see all the different things you can put in the email. For example, and the bottom you see the message. So you see hi, and then student first name, and then that will be replaced with whatever was for a particular student. And then you can put the score of the quiz inside, and it really looks like you wrote an email for that particular, which in a sense you did, right? It's just for bigger groups of students. And those would be some of the simpler examples of when, how you can connect design with analytics. So whether it's you want to see when a person is online, or you want to do certain personalized feedback messages to students, you can imagine that you have 20 messages, couple of messages for students who didn't log in and achieved a good score, students who achieved decent score but didn't read certain materials, who are always late, doing submissions late, and so on. You can do all of those proactive emails, and then over time, they will improve, student learning experience, and ultimately their success in learning. Now, I want to go briefly about other thing. I think most of you will be interested in that as well, is the adoption of learning analytics. So this is all nice. How do we go about that? How do we use these things? You know, the first thing, you know, we have all of these tools. You just need to build it. You know, just put it together. It's very simple, right? Just get all the data platforms and everything will work together. Not so easy. So it's pretty actually challenging problem. And first of all, when you look about the adoption of learning analytics, there's different factors. And even, I mean, analytics, learning analytics as a conference started in 2011. You know, a year later, people were starting talking about, okay, what are the adoption challenges? What are the elements of it? So first, we have different stakeholders, institutions, teachers, governments, parents, learners, obviously. All of those people, managers in schools, managers at universities, program directors, all of those people have their different needs, different constraints, and so on. Then we have different objectives. What do we want to do with analytics? So, for example, certain universities would care about retention. You know, it's 200,000 tuition. If we get 5 students not to drop out, it will easily pay off for any learning analytics you're going to develop. Some other universities, say in Britain, it's a public schooling system. They don't care much about that. They have a 95% retention. That's not their problem. Their problem is something else. They want to have different kind of goals. So what are your goals of learning analytics? Also then, the third constraint is the data. What kind of data you have? What are the policies around data, and so on. Then, all of the technological stuff that we develop, so all of the algorithms, all of the platforms such as OnTask and other things, all of those affect how you're going to implement that. And of course, you have constraints, whether it's internal, how open people are to analytics, how competent, how, you know, what are the current practices, policies, all of those things. And then you have external, of course, you know, GDPR in Europe or any data privacy protection laws in Australia. All they will apply here as well. And when you look at how analytics, this was one paper by our colleague by George, Shane Dawson, and Grace Lynch. They looked at how analytics being applied in institutions. And really, there are a couple of levels, really. From being aware, experimenting then the analytics, developing some dashboards for teachers, faculty, you know, different stakeholders. And eventually, you know, after those levels, you come to the level of really transforming the organization. It's like Amazon. You can have at a certain level dashboards and, you know, sales charts and things like that, but really driving the whole organization, becoming data-driven organization that changes, that uses this to drive their decisions. That's when you will use any data-driven methods to really improve what you're doing. And of course, the last level is really the sector level transformation. So that's something that, you know, departments and governments would care about, where you really think about, okay, can we use this data to change how we do things? For example, NAPLAN would be one example. I mean, not learning analytics, but when you use, we say, we collect this data, let's transform this thing in some way, let's see where the funding is missing, where it's not. That will be an example of where you do collect data, and eventually it spills over to the government, says, okay, now we're going to do this. And we want, really with analytics, we're currently here. So either institutions are aware about it, or some are experimenting with certain dashboards and so on. And that's really where most of the people are. And now there have been 2 big studies around learning analytics adoption. One is student attention in learning analytics in Australia. So that was a big Office of Learning and Teaching grant in Australia a few years ago. And that looked at how analytics is adopted at universities around Australia. So most of these things are done at university level because they are the ones using it mostly. But we're seeing more and more, and we are certainly working more with schools because they are also starting to use more learning analytics and have more data as well. The other project that really is almost like this very similar project in European centers, this SHEILA project, supporting higher education institutions for learning analytics. That's what it stands for. So they looked at, not in Australia, but actually in European Union, across different countries in European Union. And I'm just going to go over briefly some of the findings. I think they're really applicable in your domains as well. So you will see many things that apply. So first of all, we talked about different stakeholders. So one of the important stakeholders are senior managers, what they care about, why they want learning analytics. First of all, improve student learning performance. That's not surprising. improve satisfaction, improve the teaching excellence. For example, now you have in Britain teaching excellence framework. Universities are ranked according to that. So, you know, Oxford, yes, that they're excellent in research, obviously, but in teaching satisfaction, they're not so great. So things like that are affecting. Also to improve retention. Certain universities really care about that as well. So they have whether political reasons or you know, economic reasons and so on. And also there are people interested in just, you know, exploring what it can do. So those will be some of the managers, what managers care about. What are their concerns? So first of all, there's being, you know, shown different products, and yeah, we have analytics, you know, just buy this tool and that will work. And, you know, smart people realize, well, really, how that's going to work? So they're aware that not one size fits all. They also have a pressure to adopt analytics. So whether the government is asking for certain evidence of impact or things like that, or, you know, driving the change. So there are also pressures around analytics. Also interesting how the whole institution benefits. So we don't want just the dashboard for principal of school to see certain things, how the whole institution can use those things. And also they're worried about the data protection. So you don't want to go on, you know, to mess up with that one if there's certain, you know, to breach any privacy and laws. For teaching staff, it's a bit different. Teaching staff really cares about, you know, the actual learning process. So they care more about attendance, submissions, assignments, you know, when they're opening resources, how they're performing the course. So really, you know, the low-level things, you know, where learning happens. They also would like to know, can they use any of these data, you know, insights from learning analytics to improve their course designs? Is it something in the course that can be better? Maybe certain, you know, if, for example, if you have a certain, you know, students are slowing down in a certain point of the video or making pauses, rewinding 15 times, then probably is a reason why they're doing that. So if you know about that, you might improve that part of the video, part of your learning material, whatever it is. Also, big classes. So funding is getting smaller, classes are getting bigger, so that's your problem. So then you turn to technology. So that's especially at university level, you know, large undergraduate first-year courses that can be hundreds of students. And also the important one is to know why students struggle. So when you have a small class, that's fine. Teacher will know why students are struggling if you have 20, 30 students. But when you have bigger classes, that's a problem, especially for online classes where you don't see the student. So why they're struggling? Is it a, you know, personal matter, or is it something about the course? Is it a workload thing? Another thing, most people will see just their course. What about the whole? So maybe a student is lagging in one course, but he's taking 5 courses and he's doing great in other 4. So it's just about more of a time management strategy of student. You know, student is just, you know, intentionally, you know, reducing work on one course to focus on another. We don't know those things. And their concerns, first of all, and most important, workload. So is this thing gonna make my workload even worse because they're already busy? Another is it going to be used against me? That's another thing. Is it going to be used for some staff performance? So for example, we have some certain engagement of students with the learning materials. Is that going to be then, you know, is my principal go come and say, why are students not clicking in the materials or doing something? So that's another thing. Is that going to be a problem? Also, they're aware not all learning is digital, which is not, especially in school context. You know, not most things are happening. They're not all digital. And most of them are not. So how are we going to know that students are actually learning? Obviously, also not one size fits all. Another thing, correlation is not causation. So if we see certain things, that doesn't mean that's the cause of, if we see the student didn't open the materials, it's not the cause of his failing the course. There is something else that was cause of both things. So how are we going to go about that? And also they're worried about surveillance on students. Obviously, you know, we are collecting data about them. The more data we collect, it basically becomes more and more, you know, surveillance of them. When it comes to students, they're similar. They have similar needs, but they also have their own view of things. So they are interested in personalization. So that's what they care about. Can you know, I don't want to, you know, do things that I'm not interested in. Can this whole thing be personalized like everything else in my life, you know, these days? Also, they would like that, you know, this data be used to improve the teaching. So as time, as data-driven things improved, online bookstores and Netflix and other places, can this improve schools as well? Also improve the widening. So can this be used to provide access to different, other student groups? Support students of all achievements, especially high-performing students. So they're often the ones who are like, because, you're the green student, excellent. We do not, we're not going to support you in any other way. So these things can help, push good students ahead as well. And another thing, they're interested in the support of transition. So when they're transferring from year 12 to universities, there's nobody else to hold your hand as they did in high school. So now you're in a different environment and everything is on you. So can technology help us in that sense? Tools like OnTask can. So some of the things can help you with your study skills, when your time management and so on. Also, another is transferring from higher education to workplace as well. So that's another, those big transitions that are always stressful. They're gonna be stressful, but can we make them less stressful? Now, their concerns, obviously, the first one is data collection. Data collection is very, personal. So as more and more things are getting collected, students are getting, reasonably worried about that. Especially, the news reports we see from student classrooms and cameras in other parts of the world, they're not helping much with those concerns as well. Also, the data will produce biases, so especially for students, minority students or certain disprivileged students. You just have new tools that do more biasing than now we have excellent machines producing all biases. How the staff will use those things, that's another thing. So they see people, teachers struggling with Excel, so now they're going to use some very complicated tools. That's another problem. Also see a problem with quantification of learning. They say, wait a second, I'm going to a coffee shop with my friend and I'm studying there, and now you're sending me an email saying I'm not studying. So they're aware that tools are not capturing everything, and that's a problem. And also they're worried about the loss of so they like the fact that they have contact with their teachers, they have, a personal, human connection with them. If everything comes in this digital, manner that's making it less personal, they have problems with that as well. Now, on top of this studies also looked at what experts think. So people who are involved in the policy development and also about around learning analytics. What is the most important? So they brainstorm different problems and things, and then we have the 6 most important on the left side. How important? Well, privacy and transparency is the most important. That's the most important one. Interestingly, they also think that's the easiest one to do. Most people think that's an easy thing to do. It's just, a couple of PDFs, some policy documents, like things that you click on, when you say, I agree. It's just some background stuff that's actually, it's very important because it makes many, many implications later on. And the hardest thing to do is to pick goal objectives of learning analytics, what you want to achieve. So what do you want to do? The learner support, teacher support, how are you going to go about that? That's the hardest part. And other things they found in those studies is that, well, privacy ethics is most important, and they need to be addressed first. Those purpose and ethical issues need to be resolved. Why are we doing learning analytics? What's the reason? What do we want to do with this? And what are the areas of improvement? Where do we want to make a change? Is it retention? Is it course design? Is it student satisfaction? What is that in your project? So now you're talking about the project, adopting learning analytics. How are we going about that? What's the goal, right? What are the implications for users? So if you're going to do a project of implementing learning analytics, if you don't have any implications for your users, nothing going to happen very likely. Nobody will use it. They will open maybe a couple of times and that's it. So what are the implications? Is there a certain thing that you demand from students or demand from staff or managers or whoever? Also, they need to be all aligned with the bigger goals of the institution. So you need to align. If your institution is going, say, in a certain manner, say, increasing the diversity of students, well, analytics need to be aligned with that. They shouldn't be completely opposite to that. I mean, that's just a common sense. All of the things need to fit together. Of course, you need funding and have a working group, and also raise awareness in your organization. Is this something, people know what it is? They shouldn't think that it's about NAPLAN, tracking of NAPLAN scores over years. That's not learning analytics. That's okay, but that's not it. And also what data will be fed back to users. That's also important. Now, in this policy development, this is one of the common frameworks that's being used. It's called ROMA, which stands for Rapid Outcome Mapping Approach. So you have a certain problem, and you're trying to develop or redevelop your policy. So first you map the context. They call political context in this case, but you map a context. What are the factors driving the situation? Then who are the stakeholders? You define the changes of the behavior. You define the strategy. Okay, so this is what we want to achieve. This is how we're going to achieve it. Then you look at how you're going to, do you have a capacity? Your engagement strategy is you're going to develop a big data center with 50, terabytes of, okay, do we have the technical infrastructure for it? Do we have capacity in human capacity, and so on? And then a final step is establishing monitoring, just to see how things are going. Is this going as it should? And this is the way you quickly devise a strategy of adopting anything. Really, this is not about learning analytics, but this being adopted by those studies. So in terms of the SHEILA framework, those are those 6 phases, and really they're about what are the actions you want to, planning to do, address certain challenges, and how policy fits into that. So first one is mapping the political context. What are the drivers for learning analytics? For example, there might be a certain government push, like a Gonski report, saying you should, develop these kind of outcomes for students, and you should push more digital learning across all of the levels. That's your political context. That's what's driving things. And how those things, when now you map the context, how they connect to the existing things. So what school is doing, what department, whoever is doing things. What are the opportunities to leverage certain existing things to build on those. Now, identifying the stakeholders. Who is the sponsor on the senior team? Whether it's a senior team in terms of the sector or senior team within the school. Is that going to be digital learning technologist, information officer, or is going to be a principal, assistant principal, whoever is going to be involved in those things? And what are the primary users, at least for now, for the current iteration? Are we going to build a dashboard for students, teachers, parents, whoever? Desired behavioral change, so identifying those. So what area is going to be informed? And that depends on the values and goals. For example, certain institution might care more about supporting these privileged students. Other will care more about well-being, community engagement, of course, excellence of teaching. You have, many goals that can be achieved. That's one important thing. What are the desired behavior change? And how the implications fit. If you want to do learning analytics around improving the excellence of teaching, how that will be, what implications are for students? Are they going to be using more digital technologies? Are they going to be getting certain feedback? What's going to happen with teachers? Are they required to do certain things? Are certain things fed back to them? What's going to happen, right? And finally, then the next step is engagement strategy. Aligning the strategic, what is your strategy? How you're going to go about that? So you need to secure the funding, have the working group, raise the awareness of the institution. So pick the data, and who is triggering the interventions? So who's going to be the one involved in, if, for example, if analytics shows something is not going okay, who's going to be responsible for making use of that? For example, if you developed analytic dashboards, the teachers can do certain things. Are they the ones who should do that, or not? Because the last thing you want to do is to have analytics develop and they sit on somewhere on the web system. Nobody even knows how to log in, or they got logged out of the system and nobody's using that. That's just a waste of resources, nothing else. And now, analyzing the internal capacity basically consists of 2 pieces: technical evaluation and human evaluation. Technical is all the data you use, all the platforms you use, how do you store the data, what do you currently have? So that's your starting point, right? If you want to do some, I don't know, some very, very complicated system, that might be too much of a goal. But also the other, even more important, is human evaluation. Do you have resources? Is there a way of attracting them? And also, what is the culture? Is this kind, is our institution currently, trusting the data? Do we make decisions based on data? Are we open to changes, in our behavior based on data? So if data come and show certain things, are we going to adopt those findings, or are we going to do something else? Because there are different reasons why you would or would not do that. And finally is the enable monitoring. So you developed all of these things. How are you going to know that it's going okay? So you need to have certain indicators of success. Whether it's going to be numerical things, that's the simplest thing, depending on the goals. Less retention, less percentage of students dropping out. That's a simple one. But if you're talking about well-being, how are you going to do that? So that's more challenging. You can have qualitative indicators as well. Also, you need to have feedback from your users. So if you're developing a student dashboard and you didn't talk to students before they finally see the dashboard, that's bad. Then they're not going to like it. Probably it's going to be very ugly for them. They're not going to see the value, not going to be using that, and it's not going to be mobile. And then eventually they're never going to use something like that. So that's why you need to have students involved, or whoever is the stakeholder. If it's a teacher, you need to get teachers on board, because they know what. Have you seen the list of those goals? If you're a manager and developing a dashboard for teacher, you probably don't see fully their perspective. I mean, it's not easy to take somebody else's perspective. And another thing is this comes to all the systems. Many things are happening. So you're doing all kinds of policy developments, programs, and so on. So if the attrition drops, is it a cause of learning analytics or something else? Because you have all, for example, at university, if the student success goes up, is it because the government changed the structure of funding for students? That's why the access improved, or is it because you did something? So there are many things happening at the same time. So you need to know how you're going to measure, isolated from all the other things that are happening around. And in this regard, most institutions and universities and others are very mature. So typically they will be done by a certain group of people. You develop a certain tool, and you don't have proper support by the management to do this monitoring, to do this evaluation. So if you develop it ad hoc, and in most cases that's how it's been done, those monitoring and development is not very mature. So to summarize, so some of the key challenges is lack of leadership. So that's reasons why all of those problems around monitoring and establishing the strategy and so on. Often the one of the causes, thinking just buy analytics product and that's it, but that won't work. So just buying the analytics product wouldn't solve your problem, because they all depend on the course designs and the needs and a million other things. You need to have engagement with stakeholders, whether it's teachers, students, whoever. All of those tools developed needs to be based on solid pedagogical foundation to improve their learning. You need to have, of course, training and raising awareness and data literacy and so on. Having the ability to measure the effect of impact at that last stage, and to have this policy and around ethics and other challenges, in place, because it's expensive and challenging problem to do. Yeah, so that will be all for now for me. Yeah. So
before we go here in the room, let's see if we have someone online.
Yes.
All right, let me just dive in here. So thanks both Srečko and Vida for taking us through, I think, a really nice review of where we started in learning analytics, why they're needed in the first place, some of the ways in which we are collecting data, and a few of the illustrations of how analytics are being deployed. I think, you know, the question around, you know, where's the learning, or what does learning analytics have to do with learning sciences is a big one. And I think for a lot of people here, it's what do learning analytics have to do with my teaching practice, or what do learning analytics have to do with how my students learn? And I think those are really significant and relevant questions. And I think as you dive deeper into some of the tooling options with analytics, you'll find, well, it has everything to do with it. So what you're going to do now with StretchGo and Vita is you're going to, for those of you that are physically there, you're going to be engaging in some more detailed work. For those of you that are online, thanks very much for joining. We'll provide future meetings. As I said, we'll have different events running several times a month going forward, and we'll keep you in the loop. Otherwise, thanks all for joining us, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. StretchGo Vita, go have
Yep,
fun.
I'm going to stop recording now.